So Walter and I had prepared a presentation together. And I'm happy Walter's here. So we've been closer. Yeah. There you go. I think we've been working over many months and years now. So I was with OLPC for 5 years, and I had continued to work with Walter very closely. And this year in particular, we've been in a few countries, and we adopted actually the name of Walter's book, Learning to Change the World. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and hopefully initiate some conversation for later. So So we actually talk about 3 ideas. Maybe Walter, you want to talk about those ideas, and then we can complement our conversation. So I don't know.
All right. So this one's on too? Okay. Again, thank you. I apologize for being a little bit frazzled. It was an adventure getting here, but I'm glad I'm here. I missed most of Mitch's talk, but I think he probably covered a lot of the core ideas in Seymour's legacy, and a lot of us from the Media Lab, even though we weren't directly working on technology and learning, his group, the proximity, some rubbing elbows, all these collision of ideas caused a lot of spillover. So for example, in my earlier career, I was doing a lot of work on what back then I was calling electronic publishing. Nobody had any idea what that meant. But now we sort of all know what that means. But originally I was looking at how do you consume electronic media, and by rubbing shoulders with Seymour and his students, I soon realized that there was a lot more to learn, not from consuming it, but from creating it. So we started to build a lot of tools around media creation. A lot of my work was with children and actually with the elderly. I had a project called Silver Stringers, working with people with silver hair. Now I have silver hair as well. Just the pleasure of being expressive, the pleasure of being social, the pleasure of being both a teacher and a learner, which is what makes all of us human. You just see that in children, you see it in the elderly, where you don't see it so much as the in-between. And that's a whole other discussion for another night. But you know, the ideas that we can build upon, this very human sense of expression, this very human sense of being social with your expression, and again, teaching and learning, is so fundamental to the ideas that Seymour is manifesting. Now, one of the things that when Claudia and I have been on our bully pulpits of late, we've talked about, and it was alluded to a little bit in the tail end of Mitch's talk, the bits that I heard, is what's the incentive? What motivates people to do these things? What motivates people to actually get out there and be expressive, be creative, be someone who doesn't just accept the world as they find it, but makes new things? And you know, since most of the technology we've been developing of late has been geared towards schools and classrooms, we've looked a lot at what are the models of motivation in school. And unfortunately, in much of the world, it's still carrots and sticks. There are some places in the world where the teacher literally still has a stick in his or her hand in front of the class. And it's all eyes forward. And if it's not all eyes forward, smack down comes a stick. And the idea that learning is really about obedience, and about assuming the position is reinforced with this carrot stick model. And the way you avoid the stick is you avoid making mistakes. The way you avoid making mistakes is you avoid taking risks. And so if the goal of education is to reduce the world or eliminate the world of risk takers, the carrot and stick model is great. It's just what we need, because that'll do the trick. But if the goal of education is to raise a generation of problem solvers, raise a generation of entrepreneurs, raise a generation that can solve some of the problems they inherit from us, then the carrot and stick model is about the worst thing you could design in terms of motivation and incentive. So we've actually, if you look at the literature though, the literature long ago discarded carrots and sticks as a model of motivation. We just haven't thrown it out of school yet. But what the literature says over and over and over again is what motivates people are three things: autonomy, mastery, and a sense of purpose. And one of the wonderful things when you're programming Logo, or when you're programming any one of the hundreds of variants or outgrowths of Logo over the last 40 years, each child, each teacher, each practitioner is achieving a sense of autonomy, a sense of mastery, and a sense of purpose. And that really, I think, is what was and what will drive a revolution in education and learning.
So anyway, so this is three ideas that we have been talking about in our work that we have done together in the last months and basically this year. But I think that is a good introduction for OLPC. So I mean, one of the powerful ideas, and I think Gary and everyone before us had mentioned, one of these ideas is, or one of the platforms we have today, and Walter and I have been very involved with this, is the One Laptop Per Child program. I think the most powerful idea is the scale. So reaching all of these kids, but also not reaching many other kids, and we continue to work in this platform. And we, instead of like talking about the same ideas, one of the things that we have done work around is that idea of making learning visible. It's one of these ideas, like you work, you program, you create all of these wonderful projects with Turtle Art or with Scratch, but the kids not necessarily understand what's happening, the teacher doesn't understand what's happening, and as a program, in a community or a city or a country, you might not understand what's happening as kids are using these machines, and it's one of the things that we have been trying to promote. Can you pass? So making learning visible in three different levels, and maybe many in between, but so one level is at the micro level for the children and the parents, perhaps to understand what's happening with the kids. At the meso level, so maybe at school, maybe a city, and then at the program level, we have programs at the level of a city or a foundation or a country like Uruguay. So we're going to give you a few examples, and Walter, you're welcome to interrupt at any time. So one of the things that we've done, and for those of you familiar with the XO keeps a diary of the things that the kids are doing at all times. So one of the things that we're trying to promote is that we store data what the kids are doing, so that data is visible in the diary of the kids. So if you can ask. So yeah, maybe not the right order, but so this is the diary. So the diary keeps track of all the kids that the kids are doing and who they interact with. And can you go forward one more? So the kids can, so we created several tools. So one is the metadata that kids can see. The other one is a portfolio where kids are not only keeping track of their work, but with an intention. They can say, this work I can share with my teacher, and this work, in this particular work, I learn about particular things. So this is a tool that we have created. And I think this is another tool at that level that we have created where kids can understand what they have in their diary. So they can say, I've done, this is a particular view of a project. So if I did a project in Turtle Art, I understand what blocks I use. But if I look at my diary as a whole, I understand whether I'm programming, whether I'm using more media because I'm taking pictures and doing video, or I'm writing and using a lot of text. So those are some of the tools that we have been creating.
Let me just jump in before you go to the next level. One of the things that really is important as a learner is not just to do, but also to stop and reflect upon what you've done, and also to engage in a critical dialogue with other people about what you've done. And there's a wonderful book from Harvard School of Education called Studio Thinking that draws a parallel between what happens in an artist studio. An artist doesn't just make things. An artist puts things up on the wall people come to see this work and discuss it, and there's this constant cycle. In fact, it's the same cycle where at least 10 years ago the Media Lab used to operate on. Imagine, realize, critique, and reflect, and keep on iterating. We engage the kids in that same process with the software developed for the laptop. And so the kids make things, lots of tools for making, Scratch, eToys, Turtle Art, but also the diary, the journal that captures everything they do, and it's a place for them to make comments, describe what they're trying to do, describe what they're going to try to do next, and also a place where their teacher and their peers can make comments and annotate as well. And one of the things that was really quite touching to me, I was in Paraguay visiting a little town, Cocopé. Paraguay's already in the middle of nowhere. Cocopé is in the middle of nowhere. And but Artemis knows where. We were all back to Cocopé recently, but the first time I went to Cocopé, I went to a school, and the parents were all at the school. I couldn't understand, why are the parents at the school? Parents never come to schools in these places. Parents barely come to school in the United States. And yet the parents were all there because the parents wanted to learn how the diary worked, how the journal worked, how the portfolio worked, so they could see what their kids are doing. So they were at school to learn how to learn about what their kids are actually learning. And this level of engagement that's there because we're providing this vehicle for reflection, that we're making the learning visible to the child, to the teacher, and to the parent. It's in quite contrast with what we do in schools here, where we do the standardized testing in order to make the learning visible to the administrators and the politicians. This is the flip of that, the learning visible to the child, to the parent, to the teacher.
So, so at the classroom or school level, we want to help teachers understand. This is something that we have promoted as well with the groups that work with OLPC. Not much has been done at this level. We have attempted to do some work at this level. We know Uruguay is doing in real-time evaluation, not necessarily the kind of work that we would like to do, but they have developed some tools to help teachers, not necessarily for a grade, but to get teachers to understand at all times where kids are. So this is the sort of tools that we have seen and we have promoted also at this meso level for teachers and for schools to understand the learning of the kids. And then at the macro level, sort of like what happens, and we imagine tools like the one that the Scratch community has, is a community where you can sort of compare, look at your projects, look at comments, understand across countries what kids are doing, and it's some of the things that we, Walter and I have engaged in creating and launching also a way to gather that information. So we imagine that if every kid around the world in an OLPC program share a picture, we can imagine and see through the eyes of these kids what they're seeing, not necessarily what exists right now, but so using some of that metadata in the projects and the objects that they create to understand across a country and across a program what's happening. And at that sense, we've done some work at that level. So this is Turtle Art, very similar to Scratch and what you've seen today, and something that Artemis and Brian have worked on, and Walter has continued to extend. And if we get the metadata, so this is just to show you the example of what we capture when the kids program with Turtle Art and what analysis we've done. So we actually took some of the work. This is work done in Costa Rica, and we gathered some of the work. This is a competition done in Costa Rica in one of the OLPC programs, and we gathered projects and we tried to do some analysis of what the kids are doing in Costa Rica with Turtle Art. So we got these projects. We also got some other beautiful projects Can you pass the next one and then come back to this one? So this is some of the limitations of this work. We got this beautiful work as well, but we realized that some of this work is done, but not necessarily stored as a project, but stored as a screenshot of the project. So we got this beautiful work we couldn't include in the analysis. But then we've done some of this analysis trying to understand across projects and across countries what could be done and what could be used to understand, to help people realize what kids are doing, to help people play with data and understand and reflect on the work that people are doing. So I don't know, Walter, if you have anything.
Well, really, what's going on here is it's a relatively rudimentary analysis of the programs that kids actually are writing, and giving them a sense of, we have a rubric that gives them a score that gives them a sense of the kinds of tools they're using when they make their programs, and the complexity of their programs as they make them. So it just gives them some sense so they can watch over time how the complexity of what they're doing is changing. They can watch it both by visually looking at their program operate, and they can also look at this measurement. And it also gives them a sense of what they're not using, so they can start to look at that as well. We just added a new feature to this we don't have any data on yet, which is we're also keeping track of the mistakes the kids make as they go along. So we can give them some feedback on the kinds of things they routinely do right and routinely do wrong as they're coding. Not sure what that's going to look like yet, but that's sort of next up.
And I think we just want to stop here. We didn't have any more slides, but so one of the things that we discussed, what to talk to you today was one of the aspects that I don't think it's enough push or recognition, which is reflection, and the kind of tools now that we have this platform across countries of OLPC and all of the richness of each of the programs, what kind of tools we can create at different levels that will encourage that conversation, encourage that reflection, so kids are not just creating, but they're also aware of what they're creating, so their teachers and their parents.
And just a final footnote, this idea of reflection, this idea of sort of stopping and thinking about what you've done is, that was in Seymour's work from the very beginning. But it's not everybody gets excited about the artifact, and they stop and they forget about this other part of the process. And so we're really trying to make the path of least resistance in terms of using the tools involve some reflection. So you can't get away from it. Well, you can get away from it, but you got to try hard to get away from it.